Okay, so for the bag removal, if you're installing the rear speakers or the subwoofer package, you're going to need to take both of these bags off. On this side, you have the seat release assembly or cable here. You're going to need to pop this little C-ring off of that bracket there. And once you pop that off, obviously store it in a safe place because it's small, you don't want to lose it. You'll be able to remove this cable assembly to be able to take the bag off. On both sides, there will be a plug with a squeeze tab on each side of it that you squeeze and pop that plug off. You have the same thing over here on the other side. And then when you look inside of the bag itself, you'll have two large T40 bolts that you'll need to take out to pop the bag off. Once those bolts are out, you look down in here, you'll see your cable going through that goes for the seat release, and then your other wires and stuff. Right to the side, there's a flat tab straight down there. You're going to push down on that tab with your screwdriver, and that will release the bag off of the bike. Okay, so first off, we'll remove this clip. Just take a flathead screwdriver. Get underneath the corner of it and pop that right off. Obviously, put that somewhere safe. Now just push the mechanism towards you or towards the back. That'll allow you to release this and pop this off. Obviously, don't put your seat back on until you have this stuff back together, because you will not have your release to get the seat back off. So if you snap it on here, that's going to be a pain in the neck, to say the least. So you want to make sure this is definitely put back before you put this seat back on. Reach through here. Give a squeeze to those plugs. Oftentimes takes two hands to try and get in here and squeeze both of them. And release that plug, and this bag is ready to come out once we take those bolts out. Okay, so I've removed the two T40 bolts that are in here. I'm just going to take my screwdriver, push down on that tab. You'll hear a little click, and your bag is loose, and off it comes. Okay, so now that we have our bag out, we're going to work on installing this panel right onto the top of it. Everything that you're going to see in this portion of the video is going to be exactly the same on the other bag. The only difference is the other bag will have the heated seat switch right here that when you're doing disassembly, you'll need to unplug that. Otherwise, everything else is going to be exactly the same. So first things first, I would suggest taping this area off. Our panel fits along these lines, but it's going to be easier to mark the places that you're drilling and or cutting out if you have tape, and you can actually mark that with a Sharpie. So we'll get this taped off roughly. Okay, so now that you have that taped off, just place your panel right on top. This line here is going to match right up with the line of the opening. So you want, you can pop this open and just make sure that you're flushed up with that. So once you do that, just push down on it. It should mesh right up with this here with no gapping of any kind. And then you're going to want to mark with a Sharpie the inside edge of this hole. Mark your lower nut and bolt holes here. And also you're going to want to mark your screw holes. Now your screw holes are a lot deeper and not something that a Sharpie is going to go through. So there's a number of ways you can do this. You can take something like a pick tool and poke that through there and kind of jab down in to leave an indentation where those are at. You can take an ink pen apart and take the inner portion of that. That will fit down through the hole. Or you could take a drill bit that fits. I would not suggest drilling them with the drill because the chuck is most likely going to hit this portion here, and it's definitely not something you want to knock the paint off by accident. So if you have a drill bit that fits the hole, just push it down in there and kind of turn it by hand so it'll score the tape. So in this instance, I'll do the most basic of the basic and wiggle around an ink pen inner here, just to show practically anything can get the job done for you when it comes to this. So now that we've done that, you can take this off. You've got your upper hole, your bottom hole, your 4 speaker mounting holes, and the hole that you're going to cut out. So we'll get to working on the disassembly of the bag itself and then worry about these. Actually, I take that back. It's probably going to be easier while this is all one surface to go ahead and drill these holes out, and then we'll cut this after removing this. Okay, so the drill bit I'm using is a 13/64. It is a little bit larger than what the bolts are that are going to go through here. So if you don't have this exact size drill bit, you could probably go down a size with no issue at all there. Obviously, there's nothing underneath any of these spots that you have to worry about. You don't want to ram the drill through there because eventually you would hit the inner layer of the bag, but you definitely have plenty of wiggle room to spare. And it does love to grab and pull, so. Okay, so with those all drilled, we'll get to disassembling this. Okay, so for disassembly, first you're going to remove these 3 screws along the inner side here. Turn this towards you. Go ahead and open up the side door. You'll notice a torch right here behind the handle. And then a row of them going up the side here. You'll also want to remove them from this tube, the two from this shiny panel there. All of the screws that are in these panels are the exact same length, so you do not have to keep up with any of them. They're all going to go back in any hole that you find. So once you have all those off, you're going to pop this panel here up. It does have a clip, a couple clips in the back corners here and here, so those are going to unsnap, and then there'll be one more screw in the top here that holds this top panel on. So once you have that off, you're ready to take this panel up. And now you're off. So you can do your cutting of this hole without having to worry about damaging anything related to the bag. So cutting of this obviously can be done in a multitude of different ways. It is just plain plastic behind it, so you don't have to worry about anything else. Obviously, if you're going to use something like a jigsaw, then you'll want to make sure that everywhere stays taped and is completely covered so the flat portion of your jigsaw doesn't do any scratching. You can use something like a rotozip or a Dremel. We have an air tool that we do this sort of thing with, so there's a bunch of different ways you can do it depending on what tools you have. The only notes really would be to either stay right on the line or even just a touch on the inside of the line. You want to go ahead and leave plenty of meat on the plastic there for your nuts and bolts that are holding the panel on in this portion. If you go to the outer portions of the line, you make that fairly thin and you have to worry about strength. So we'll get to cutting this piece out and then move on to the next step. Okay, so now our hole is cut and our tape has been removed, and it's time to start working on putting the panel onto this panel. So in your mounting kit, you will have a couple of the screws that are used for the ends here. These are an Allen head. If you have the ability to, when you're doing our front speakers, you can always take a couple of the bolts that come in the front of the bike that are hidden behind the scenes for the speaker pods, things like that, and substitute those into the kit here and use these in that location or throw these away. But if you don't have access to leftovers, then we do supply these. They come with a little rubber washer on it that helps protect the paint on the outside. The biggest thing to note is the lock washer that comes for these screws or any of the BMW screws are these lock washers that have a black insert on the inside. They are a different size than the other screws, but they have the exact thread pitch and everything as the BMW OEM screws do. So these are going to specifically be for the BMW replacement screws with that black insert. All of the others are going to have a white one on the inside. If you try to interchange these, they'll start, but then immediately start to cross thread, and obviously you don't want to deal with that. So go ahead and place your panel here, grab one of these screws with that washer on it, drop it into here, and pop it right into the hole that you pre-drilled, and then do the same thing on the other side. Once you have those in, you can go ahead and loosely install the nuts on the other side. So if you're using the screws that we have supplied, they are a 3mm Allen. So I would take a 3mm Allen wrench to hold the one side, not to actually do the screwing of that side. And then it's a 5/16 socket that you'll use to actually tighten this down. I would do everything with the socket so the screw on the other side is not spinning. You don't want that sitting there tearing up the paint. Most likely you're going to want a deep well socket for this. I didn't grab a deep well, so I'm only going to go to reasonably snug here before I bottom out. That's about it for this side. I wouldn't suggest tightening these all the way up, because if you do, you may need a little bit of wiggle room lining up the other screws, because this plastic panel does have the ability to flex on you right now when it's not mounted down. So you need to make sure all of these holes are lined up. So I would have everything kind of nut and bolted through before doing the final tightening of those. So Once you're here, you're going to actually be placing your speaker in as well. So we will basically take this. You have two longer screws and two shorter screws. These have a Phillips head on them, so you'll need a Phillips head screwdriver for that. But your longer ones are obviously going to go where the deeper portions of the panel are, which are the two in the back versus the two in the front. You'll drop the speaker in. Make sure this lines up. Loosely screw that into the plastic. Same thing with this one. And push through your other two. So now that you have all those in there, grab your lock nuts. Loosely install those. And now technically everything is all lined up and in the proper space. So now you'll just need to tighten all of these up. These, it won't matter so much. You can either tighten them using a Phillips head on this side because you're not worried about really scarring anything or messing up any paint or something like that. So these nuts here, they are going to require an 11/32 socket or wrench to hold these in place. So we will get to tightening those up. Okay, so everything's tightened up. No need to tighten these extremely tight. I mean, they do have those nylon lock washers, or lock nuts, so they're not going anywhere, but just get them snugged by hand and everything will be good. So before putting this back on here, we need to go ahead and prep our wires for this. So we'll bring the bag back forefront here. And in the kit, you'll have this wire harness. You'll want to bring that out a little bit farther than this plug so you have some extra wiggle room here, and then wire tie that in alongside this other harness here. Okay, so again with the speakers, you'll have this, which is your crossover. This divides up the sound that goes to the tweeter and to the mid-range to make sure they're only playing frequencies that they're good at, so they'll get the better overall sound quality. So the input end is the one with just one set of wires come. It does say in. You have a positive and a negative. They are marked as far as which one is positive and negative, but the smaller of the two is actually your positive instead of the larger. It's backwards because that's the way Harley Davidson does it, so these are made to plug into Harley. I do suggest just yanking this rubber boot completely off of the small one. You can leave it on the other one if you want, and then they will plug into here. Sometimes these spade connectors can be a little bit on the loose side. If so, give that a squeeze to tighten it up just in case. Plug that in, plug in your negative, and then give those a taping to make sure that they can't possibly come loose, or that the exposed end on this positive one is not going to be touching anything that matters. will leave you with this end that's going to be connecting to your speaker. You can go ahead and bundle some of this up because you don't need that much slack in it. So you can either do that with some with a wire tie, or just wrap a loop of tape around here to not have so much of that flopping around behind the scenes. So the other ends of this are labeled for plugging into the speakers, and they are sized appropriately for the terminals on the speaker that you're connecting to. So they will only plug in one way if you follow the sizes of those. Now, for those of you that are not doing our standard Kappa series speakers, if you custom ordered a, say, Arc Moto CX6s or the Cicada Audio Neo horn speakers or something along those lines, the speaker lands right about here when it comes to the magnet. So the Infinity Kappa will clear no problem. The other bigger, beefier magneted speakers will hit this portion here. So you will need to take this wire loose and actually trim this portion out right here on the bending portion. So kind of from here to here will need to be cut out if you're doing a larger than normal speaker. This wire can just stay loose and be tucked back in after the speaker's there. It's not really critical that it's in this housing. But if you're doing the Kappa speakers, you will not have to cut that portion out. That'll just stay as is, and they will drop right in. So grab your lid at this point. Plug your terminals in. They all have a little clicking tab, so you can give each one a tug to make sure it's fully snapped onto there, and reassemble. Just slide your handle through the notch there. Tuck this end up underneath the panel. Drop all this down in. There may be a little bit of flex to it because these panels can sometimes settle and warp a little bit. They do absolutely settle back down the first time it's in any heat or anything. It'll take all that tension off. Most times like this, it just drops right in. But if you ever have one that seems to be resisting it, don't worry about it. Give it a little push, put your screws in, and it will absolutely reform itself to that proper bend. And at this stage, you're just going to put all your screws back in and you're ready to go. That's it. We're all mounted. We'll put the grill on it once we actually put it back on the bike. Okay, so now it's pretty straightforward to reinstall your bag. Fish your seat cable through. Tuck the new speaker cable through and the original plug back through. Push up until that catch grabs. Plug the bag back in. Reconnect your seat release cable. Pop your clip back on there and plug your speaker cable in. And that's it. Reinstall your Torxes in the bag and you're good to go there. Now when it comes to the grill, that is going to be something that pressure fits into this hole. So just get this lined up the direction that you'd like this logo to be, and slowly work these tabs in one by one. Just be nice and careful and gentle with this because you don't want to end up chipping the paint inadvertently with those pieces. Push it in flush and you're in there.